Gulf of Mexico.
In a
It's
pool.
a great way to start the podcast. We're going to be talking about the upcoming debate and the Supreme Court vacancy on episode 262 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and we've got a couple of new faces. This one, not so much. Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing fantastic. I am glad I am no longer a resident of the state of California, from which I fled about almost 10 years ago. Actually, yeah, exactly. It was 10 years ago because they've decided to ban the internal combustion engine, which is going to be fantastic for, well, car culture basically is very much part of California culture. And I'm really going to enjoy watching from afar Governor Gavin Newsom get trolled by even lefties out there in California.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that all the cars are going to be replaced by those ones in the Flintstones where you just have to like drag your feet across the floor and get it going. But we'll see what happens in 10 years. Also joining us, we have Sam Karnick, Director of Publications at the Heartland Institute. First time in the podcast. How are you, sir?
Doing fine, Donnie. How are you?
Oh, fantastic, as always. And also joining us for the first time, Samantha Fillmore, Government Relations Coordinator at the Heartland Institute. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Super pumped?
Super pumped. I have
Fantastic.
my green shirt on. I have my Heartland mug, brand all the way.
Oh, nice. Very nice. More committed than probably any of us, so that's good. Good way to start off. So the last time I was on the podcast, well, save for that like 2 minutes where I popped on last week, we talked about the upcoming debate and we had predictions. And my prediction was that Joe Biden wasn't even going to show up to the debate. So we're less than a week away. I think it's Tuesday, September 29th. So we're only a few days away from this first presidential debate. So like I said, it was like a question of whether or not he's going to show. This was based on the assumption, that Biden's kind of mental capacity is waning a little bit. So, but it seems like the narrative lately for like the talking heads in the news has been like, all right, well, it looks like the expectations for Joe Biden have been set so low that basically he just has to come out there and not call the moderator dad, and everyone will say that he did fantastic. So, Jim, I mean, do you buy this?
Well, certainly, I don't think you can possibly set the expectations any lower than they have been set. So, yeah, your thesis is pretty strong. Look, we've talked about this for a while, that Joe Biden's cognitive decline is palpable, and it seems to be accelerating. In the journalism biz, in the media biz, when you cover a campaign or cover the White House, they have a term. It's called they put on what they call a full lid. And that means that there's going to be no more media events today. There's going to be no, we're not going anywhere. If you're following the president, there's nothing happening. Basically you can go home as a journalist. You don't have to hang out at the White House anymore. And they do the same thing for Joe Biden. And for all presidential campaigns, they put a lid. And usually this is done, when I was covering the White House back in the mid 2000s, the lid would come at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Or if you're traveling with the president, it would come later in the afternoon saying that's the end of his events. We're going to put a lid on it. And that's basically a promise that there's going to be no news. There's going to be no, unless there's something, an emergency happens or some kind of disaster happens, but there's going to be no more news to be made by the president or the candidate that day. Joe Biden has the Joe Biden campaign has put a lid on their candidate before noon about 15 times here in the month of September. In fact, I think almost an average of like 3 days a week, the lid for Joe Biden has been put on before noon. And on Thursday, the lid was put on before 9 a.m. And this is happening 2-3 days a week. That I think it was on Monday of this week as well. There was a lid put on very early in the morning. This is amazing. We are 40 days away from the election, and this guy is taking 3 days off plus weekends a week. He's not campaigning at all. And I think obviously, if you want to be president, you need to get out there and campaign. I know that, the Democratic Party has embraced masking, masks and lockdown and social distancing. And they scold anybody who deviates from the strictest restrictions on our freedoms as possible. But you're trying to be president of the United States. You need to get out there, even with your socially distanced people out in an airplane hangar somewhere. You need to get out there. I think Joe Biden isn't out there because he's not capable of being out there. I think the few times that he has come forward in public, like he had to, we're going to talk about the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her replacement on the Supreme Court in this podcast. But, he came out at night. It was in the late evening, I think 6 or 7 o'clock, moving very slowly to a microphone, reading a prepared statement, and then turning and walking away. This man does not behave as somebody who has the vigor and the energy and the mental sharpness to compete to be president of the United States. And his schedule makers, there's some reason why they have to put a lid on every morning. It's because they don't want him out there for people to see.
Yeah.
This is why the debates, I think, are going to be so fascinating, because we're going to actually see if the people that are cynical like me and think that Joe is not out there because they can't put him out there. They literally cannot put him out there. It would be that disastrous for the campaign. And they're going to arrest him up now and do debate prep. They're going to arrest him up for Tuesday. So we'll see. But the expectation certainly couldn't be any lower, because he is literally hiding from the American people.
So
Yeah.
And that I'm going to beat Joe Biden.
So can we try that at work? Like putting a lid on it at 9 a.m.? I'm kidding. Jokes aside, though, I think it was best said by Representative Matt Gaetz at the RNC when he likened Joe Biden to Weekend at Bernie's, and that he just needs to be a warm body. And he is, I think, one of the quotes, and I won't get this completely correct, but he will be starring in a film that is written, produced, directed, and acted by other people. And he's just a warm body. And that's exactly what this scenario is looking like it's going to be. That's all the Democrats want. They just want someone alive and with a little bit of a pulse to get in. And that's all they need. And honestly, when you compare that to the boisterous current president and all of the tweeting and everything that Trump does, I think there's a part of the DNC that feels that a calm, quiet Biden is more palatable to those who have more sensibilities to.
I'm curious about that, because I remember like one of the who was it? It was Barack Obama. I think it was versus Romney. And Barack Obama was like very soft tone, and everyone thought he was like asleep at the wheel. So it almost like played against him. But I think you're right. But one of my questions going into this is like, I think like this election, probably more than any, it's like the lines in the sand have been drawn. It's like you're either voting for Trump or you're voting against Trump. So I'm just kind of curious of like how this debate is really going to play out in a political atmosphere as divergent as the one that we find ourselves in now. So, I mean, Sam, what do you think about that? Like, do you think either of these candidates have more to lose than the other when it comes to this debate in a couple of days?
Definitely. The way campaigns tend to go is that the person who's in the lead tries not to do anything stupid that will lose them the lead. And that's what you saw from Hillary Clinton in 2016, where she basically stayed out of things as much as possible. And then at the end realized they look at their internal polls and they realize, whoa, we're behind and it's too late to do anything about it. So what's happening now is precisely what you should expect, which is that Biden would try to do a rope-a-dope kind of campaign, just keep taking whatever keep taking whatever blows come his way and try to stagger up against the ropes so that he doesn't fall visibly. So that's what he's been doing. The problem that you run into is when your internal polls tell you that you're slipping, you have to make a choice. You have to say, well, are we slipping because one, the activities that we've been doing are getting us in trouble, or two, is our failure to act getting us in trouble? Clearly, the Biden campaign up to this point has decided that it's what he does, what he says. Whenever he gets out there, he's getting himself in trouble. So they're putting a lid on his appearances so that he can take his afternoon nap and so forth. But that is a double-edged sword, because if they're wrong about that, if it is in fact the fact that Biden is not getting out there that's causing him to slip, because it plays to the narrative that so many people already have in their heads, which is this: he's losing it,
Right.
and he can't get out there. So he comes back, and the idea would be then to do the debate, be up against the ropes there too, and just whatever Trump does, assume that your side will handle it later.
Yeah.
That you can look as bad as you want in the debates. You can fail to answer anything Trump says. You can just do what you want and say whatever you want. And then later, both the press and the Democrat Party, which are kind of two aspects of the same thing, of the progressive movement, they will both work to your benefit afterward. So the idea is just don't get killed in the ring.
Right. But Sam, that strategy didn't work for Hillary Clinton very well at all. I mean, as you mentioned, obviously she lost the election. People forget, but I think it did have an impact on the race, was when she was at the 9/11 commemoration, and she passed out from what they said was dehydration, and there was video of somebody standing there watching it, of her basically being tossed into a van like a sack of potatoes because she
like
had
a side of beef.
passed out. Yeah. And that has an effect on what voters think about it. But frankly, Donald Trump out-hustled her all the way to the finish line. He was holding 2, sometimes 3 campaign rallies a day all across the country. He was in Pittsburgh. He was in Ohio. He's going to be in North Carolina, I think, on Thursday. I mean, he's out there campaigning because that's his strength, and he gets his people energized. I find it really hard to believe that somebody could be so far ahead in the polls and have so much confidence that this is a good strategy, while your opponent is out there actually conducting rallies in airport hangars, for instance, and maybe not as big, not 20,000 people in an arena, but actually out there campaigning, getting voters excited about voting for you, spreading the word, getting excitement. There is nothing like that for Joe Biden. Nothing. The only excitement on the streets that for Joe Biden are riots. That's where his voters are. That's the only activity happening out in public is unrest and rioting. The contrast could not be more. This election, as Trump wanted it to be, is going to be all about Donald Trump. Everything is all about Donald Trump. It always has been. And so we're going to find out if the people want more Donald Trump, or who knows? You don't even know what the other side is going to give you, other than, well, kind of what you see in the streets.
I'm still not ruling out Biden going up on stage with like a face mask, a COVID face mask, and then somebody talking for him through a little speaker that's hidden in his mask. I'm seriously not ruling that out. But
now, let's remember, going back to 2016 just for a moment, let's remember that there was very little enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton. The enthusiasm was basically that she's the first woman running for president on a major ticket, and that didn't get it done. So I'm not saying that that Biden and his handlers are smart to do this, or that they're making the right choice. What I'm saying is that that's their thinking, and it's certainly a plausible case they have, which is that the press can save them. It seems to me unlikely to work.
Yeah, no, they'll definitely have the spin room going on full cycle after the debate. But the Commission on Presidential Debates, they released a press release recently where they were talking about how the moderator, Chris Wallace, announced the topics for the first presidential debate. So the topics of the debate will include the Trump and Biden records, the Supreme Court, COVID-19, the economy, race and violence in our cities, and the integrity of the election. So, Jim, it seems like there's a pretty important topic that is missing from this. I mean, for an existential crisis that is climate change, no one seems to care about it. So what's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, the only people who care about it are the climate activists on the left. I'm on a lot of their email lists. In fact, I just saw one right before we hit record on this podcast, something called Climate Power 2020. Subject line, must read. Rewrite that list of debate topics, Chris Wallace, and put climate crisis at number 1.
There you go.
So yeah, the only people upset about this are the professional climate agitators. I'm sure. Look, there's going to be are there 3 debates or 4 debates? I can't remember.
There's 3, and then there's one vice presidential one.
That's right. I mean, there's no doubt climate change is going to become one of the topics and one of those things eventually. I mean, people complaining about what the topics are this time, seem to forget, at least they're scheduled to have 2 other debates, because there's lots of topics that aren't on here. Climate change actually always consistently finishes near the bottom of the list of issues that voters actually care about. Leftists care about it. Environmental activists obviously care about it. Their donors care about it. But voters, when they're thinking about why they want to support one candidate over the other, climate change ranks like 13th out of 14, just about every year. And it's been going on for a decade. But So climate change isn't on the agenda. I'm sure it will be at some point. But healthcare is actually an issue that most voters care a lot about. That's not going to be talked about on Tuesday. And you would think they used to have a debate. Sam would probably know this as well, but if my memory is bad, but in years past, there would be a debate focused almost entirely on foreign policy. That's going to be a really good one because there are enormous successes that Donald Trump could talk about. In fact, all of these topics, Donald Trump has a pretty good record on all of them. But on foreign policy, I mean, basically, we have peace breaking out in the Middle East after every single smart person in Washington and every former administration official, even Republican administration officials in other administrations, were saying that Trump was making a huge mistake. Yeah. Yet now we have peace breaking out in the Middle East. He started no new wars or even police actions with our military in 4 years. ISIS has been completely decimated. NATO's paying its fair share. I mean, Kosovo and Serbia are getting along and recognizing Israel together. And you have economic happiness breaking out all over the place among former enemies. I mean, frankly, to have done all that in 3 years while the entire establishment of Washington and the media are trying to destroy your presidency with fake Russian collusion nonsense, I think that might be one of the greatest foreign policy accomplishments by any president in any of our lifetimes.
Well, I always bring this up. I always bring up this idea that it seems like the real climate alarmist types have just got to be pulling their hair out. You know, like the Greta Thunbergs of the world. It's just like, why are people caring about this? We're like at the end of the world, 10 years, if we don't do anything, we're all going to die, but we're all talking about everything else that's going on. No one's talking about this. So Samantha, I mean, like I could say this all the time, that seemingly nobody cares about climate change in like the general public. Do you, and I'm in my own little echo chamber, but do you also get that sense, or am I off base? What do you think?
I think that climate change, like many of the other topics that the left likes to use, is convenient and used when it is convenient, when it's a great tagline, when it's a good headline, when there's a reason to villainize the president. Then it's the single most issue. The world is on fire. It's burning. However, when it's something like getting a Democrat in office as a president, then it's no longer a hot button issue. So it's a hot button issue right now for Gavin Newsom. It's a hot button issue for AOC and the Green New Deal. However, when it comes down to the brass tacks and they want to get Trump out of the office, suddenly it's the 10th issue on the, not even the 10th. So I think I'm not surprised by this at all. I think it's very common for the Democrats, and I mean, even to be fair, Republicans, to use what is most pressing. But yeah, most people generally, I would agree and subscribe to the ideal that most people do not generally care that much about climate change the way it seems.
It's just like to use their analogy, you know, like Greta's analogy, the house is on fire, but we're like picking out what the sheets are going to look like on the bed. It's like
we're the dog in that meme where like everything, we're like, this is fine.
Yeah, just like be consistent. That's all I just, it drives me crazy. But there was also another, go ahead, Sam.
Remember that you're not trying to reach 100% of the voters. You're not trying to reach even 51% of the voters. You're trying to reach 2 or 3 or 5% of the voters. You're trying to reach those who remain undecided. And for some of those, climate change may be an important issue. It may be simply aspirational on the part of either party as to whether those voters care or don't care about climate change. It may be some of them care about climate change and are disturbed by how much government wants to do about it. But remember that in the Democrats' debates, according to Media Matters, which is a very left-wing organization, only 7% of the questions were about climate change. So this is not an unusual thing. And it's true that Republicans and independents don't care. It's the lowest rated issue for them, but Democrats bring that up a bit because it is a more important issue for Democrats. So what these advocates may be onto is that you can get some of these people who might just consider voting Democrat, some of the undecideds, if you were to attend to climate change. You're also going to lose some. So again, these are all calculations that people have to make based on their internal polls. Because remember, the campaigns pay for polls that are independent of the polls that you see in the Real Clear Politics categories, and that you see on ABC or written in the Washington Post. The polls that the candidates get are accurate. The polls that you are told about are meant to influence voting patterns. So what you hear about in the Real Clear Politics, those are polls that are meant to influence voting patterns. And I'm not saying Real Clear Politics is doing that, but the polls, the actual people who are buying those polls, the candidates are buying polls to tell them what to do. So what I always tell people is, if you're looking at an election, you want to know what's going to happen. Don't look at what the public opinion polls say. Look at what the candidates do.
Right.
And the fact that Joe Biden is planning, allegedly going to participate in this upcoming debate, and the others, should tell you where the election is actually going.
Tentatively scheduled. I think that, again, like when it's the Green New Deal, when it's the Paris Climate Accord, then Trump and his stance on the environment, or lack thereof, is like, Ben, Greta burning house, the house is on fire. It's the top issue. But again, it's not listed in this debate. And one of the things that was so frustrating when we looked at the topics that were going to be included in the debate is the Supreme Court vacancy, which, in my opinion, and I know we'll transition to it in a moment, but should not even be debated, because it's a constitutional. This is not, like, it is outlined that it's okay what's about to happen and transpire in the Constitution.
Sure.
Everyone is well within their rights. And yet I guarantee you that a significant portion of the debate is going to be centered around this vacancy. And it's like, so the issues that suddenly matter on one hand aren't being discussed at all. And then something that shouldn't even be a topic of discussion, i.e. the vacancy, because it's outlined in the Constitution, that's going to be the meat of the debate. And that just goes to show that these debates are not about actually addressing the issues. It's about getting the taglines, getting the headlines, getting the voters to show up, and villainizing the president as best as they can while someone is puppeting Biden. And
I do want to switch over to that real quick.
But
Samantha,
before we do that, whom do you think that's going to help? Whom do you think that issue is going to help?
Discussing the Supreme Court vacancy?
Discussing the Supreme Court. Yes.
Oh, of course it's going
to help Trump.
See, disagreement.
No, it's going to help Trump.
Okay, we'll get into this.
Because his voters are motivated by this issue. That's why, look at what the politicians do. Biden has not said, even though he had promised that he would name his Supreme Court choices, he didn't do it. And even though he said, yes, we can talk about this issue, he won't talk about it. Why is he not doing that? Because it hurts him and it helps Trump. And this question being asked in the debate is just going to help Trump. So don't be worried about this being a biased question that is meant to hurt one of the candidates. I think it is meant to discuss an important issue. And the issue is, what do we do about the Supreme Court? Because don't forget that the big question sitting out there is court packing. And my guess is that the public is not ready for court packing, and therefore it is an important issue. This should be discussed for the election. It should be worked out before people vote, especially for.
All right, I do want to transition to the Supreme Court, and I was going to say one more thing about climate change, but forget it. We're already 5 minutes past that. But before we do, I do want to get just real quick, just quick fire round. What the predictions for, like, with the day after the debate, like Wednesday morning, what are the headlines going to be about the debate, Jim?
The headline will be Joe Biden showed up and did not dribble oatmeal on his shirt.
Okay. All right. Samantha, what do you think?
I agree. I think it's going to be like the DNC, where he gave a C level, if that, speech, but everyone was so happy because he just stayed on topic.
on the Joe Biden curve, they're like, we'll give him a B on that.
Across the board, this was like a C, D, but for Joe Biden, he was awake the whole time. So 10 out of 10.
Sam Karnick, quick fire. What do you think?
It will be Joe Biden is still alive.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to be the only one that goes out on a limb here. I still think that he's going to bow out at the last minute. I think we're going to get news Wednesday night that he came down with a mild case of COVID and he doesn't want to risk infecting his staff. So he's not going to do it. That's my prediction. So I'm going out on a limb. I think you guys are all playing it safe.
I want to see that test. I want to see it performed live, actually. That's the only way I'll believe
That's
it.
the debate. Just Joe getting his nose swabbed. And
Well, Donald Trump just keeps talking.
Yeah, Trump is going to demand to still go out there and just going to debate himself.
Yeah. Well, he would certainly enjoy it.
Yeah. All right. So let's switch over to the SCOTUS vacancy here. So it was Friday night, I believe. I looked down at my phone. I was hanging out with family. I looked down at my phone and I see the news that pops up. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away, and I am shocked. All right, I'm shocked. And I'm not like a SCOTUS fanatic, but I understand like the respect that like position of power deserves. So I do want to start off this segment again, because I'm not like this, I'm not like this super academic when it comes to the Supreme Court or anything. So I want to start off by reading a part of a statement written by the Honorable Lee Lieberman Otis, Senior Vice President and Director at the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies. And the Federalist Society, we've covered them before, but they are a conservative libertarian group that advocates for a textualist and originalist interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. So the piece I'm going to read from is titled "Rest in Peace, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg." Justice Ginsburg will be best remembered as a legal pioneer and advocate for women's rights, but she should also be remembered as a lawyer's lawyer. Her success as an advocate took root in large measure in her discipline in selecting cases and in carefully reading precedent, both for what is included and what is omitted. It's been said that what was at the root of her famous Ginsburg-Scalia friendship was their shared extracurricular tastes, most notably opera. That's true, but it's only part of the story. Their shared respect for good legal craftsmanship was also a central, if largely overlooked, foundation for their friendship. Both cared a lot about the force of reason in their opinions. Each firmly believed that mature people could in good faith take different views on even the most important legal questions without being histrionic or posing a threat to their adversaries' feelings. Instead, they saw their differences as providing each other with opportunity to sharpen their own thinking. Justice Ginsburg put it best. "When we disagreed," she said, "my final opinion was always clearer and more convincing than my initial circulation. Justice Scalia honed in on all the soft spots, energizing me to strengthen my presentation." Of Justice Scalia's dissent from her majority opinion in the VMI case, which Scalia made a point of sharing with her as soon as possible, she said, "He absolutely ruined my weekend. But my opinion is ever so much better because of his stinging dissent. Although no nonsense and somewhat intimidating in oral argument, off the bench, Justice Ginsburg brimmed with graciousness, class, and strength." So the article continues, but I'm not going to read the entire thing. If you want to continue reading it, I will link to it in the show notes. But Samantha, what was your initial reaction to the news on Friday night?
So I am a large Supreme Court nerd. I took about every course in college that I could that had anything to do with it. I initially thought, this is sad, because as a young woman involved in politics, at some point, I tentatively would like to go to law school. Just everything she did for women's rights in the workforce and just breaking through glass ceilings, doing all that she did in the era in which she lived is truly remarkable on any accord. And I vehemently believe that a life well lived should always be venerated, despite I like policy-wise disagree with a large majority of everything she did, especially in the later years. But someone who dedicated that much of their life to public service should be honored. And so I was saddened. It was like watching this Titan finally, not fall, but that was an awful way to put it. But watching this pioneer finally
right off into the sunset.
Right off into the sunset. Thank you. You really helped me out there. It was sad. Then the next thing I thought was, wow, I didn't think this election could get any spicier, and yet it just did.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what I was going to go to next. But Jim or Sam, do you want to jump in with your initial reactions to the news?
Well, I'll jump in, and the initial reaction I had is like, well, one, I wasn't shocked. I mean, she was 87 years old, and this was her fourth bout with cancer, and it was pancreatic cancer. So, she put up a lot of good fights for a long time, and so she should be, that's something to appreciate. But to be honest, I also had the reaction that this election, 2020 isn't done with us yet. It keeps telling someone to hold its beer because there's another crazy thing coming right down the pike. But frankly, I don't know if this may not reflect well on me. The first thing I thought of, though, one of the first things I thought of was that she blew it, and that she should have resigned from the Supreme Court under Obama. And I said, I said to myself, and I think I've texted some friends, she remained on past 2016 because she was convinced, like almost everybody in the country was convinced, that Hillary Clinton was going to be our next president. She was appointed to the court by Bill Clinton. She wanted to be replaced on the court by the first female president of the United States, Hillary Clinton. Wow. And when Hillary lost, she thought to herself, well, now I got to hang on another 4 years. And that's going to be tough when I'm in my fourth battle against cancer. And so, although they said that, allegedly her granddaughter, she told her granddaughter allegedly that her most fervent wish was that she would be replaced by the next president of the United States, or a new president. Well, if she really wanted that, that's the risk you take. And she's going to be replaced by Donald Trump, who is going to be the first president to have 3 picks on the Supreme Court in I think 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's so similar to what Samantha kind of teased at the end of her statement there, is like my first reaction, again, not being this like adherent to the court or anything like that. It's just like, oh man, like this election just got amped up a few degrees. I mean, if like people thought that this was the most important election, it's just like this was just gasoline dousing onto that fire. Sam, am I overstating things or am I understating things?
Not in political terms, you're not overstating things. My initial reaction was rather like Jim's, that I had expected this to come. She had pancreatic cancer, which is unfortunately a death sentence. That said, my initial thought about this was how tragic it was that she had left it out there, that people were waiting to hear about her death at some point, that she had left it out there, just sitting out there, that the world will change when this woman dies. That's a really strange and sad and tragic choice on her part. She could have made that a different choice when she was 83, 84 years old. Chose not to. And then she had to live with that choice. And people, saying, oh, she has to live longer. She has to live longer. And other people saying, hey, people don't live forever. Just what a sad and political, grossly political choice to make.
Yeah, it's that was another thing. It's like the first tweets that I saw out there were just like what the political ramifications are. And of course, I had those thoughts too. But I was just thinking like, oh God, politics is a cesspool. That was my first thought. But Jim, I was going to say that I was going to bring this up later, but that whole like dying wish thing, the last wish, I want to be replaced by the next president, which is just like, well, what if Trump gets reelected? Do you not want to get replaced for 4 years? I don't really get that. But Samantha, I mean, as the person that probably paid the most respects to Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Instagram, what are your thoughts about this whole dying wish concept?
I am ultimately saddened by it. And why I say that is because I cannot imagine my dying wish. And again, I truly hope with my heart of hearts that this was just an exaggeration by her family and this was not her legitimate dying wish or last breath of air. Because I think that's just generally a sad
sure.
to be
sure.
like, I would like to hope that when I am passing away, I'm thinking about my family or the life I lived in. Granted, like I said, a large chunk of her life was dedicated to public service and to the courts. But on the topic of dying wish, you've seen it already militantly used in the media. It's been used by AOC. It's been used by Chuck Schumer. I mean, it's plastered all over all of corporate media, pretty much that, oh my goodness, the night of her death, Mitch McConnell went out and he announced that he would vote. And this is just not adhering to her dying wish. How disrespectful. And with that, I just want to say that no one it was acted by the Democrats in exactly the same way when Scalia died, as well as the fact that it is not her seat. As
Right.
tremendous of a woman as she was and all that she did, the seat existed before she was nominated to the Supreme Court. It exists after. It is not hers to be bequeathed upon to anyone. And everything that's happening and that has followed since is totally in suit with what's allowed in the Constitution. You're seeing it militantly used. Like Trump is disrespecting this
Sure.
amazing woman's dying wish. It's like, can we just take a break? Can we just chill? Like it's totally allowed and feasible with what is written in the Constitution.
Yeah, right. No kidding. So I'll say this for like the fifth time. I don't follow the Supreme Court that closely or anything like that. So like my knowledge about like the processes and all that really don't go much further back than the Neil Gorsuch situation in like 2016. So I remember then, though, that the Republican-controlled Senate didn't want to confirm a President Obama nominee until after the election, after the 2016 election. So, Jim, isn't it hypocritical that Republicans want to fill this seat even though we're even closer to the election in 2020?
No, because the rule is that if the Senate and the presidency are held by opposite parties, that frankly, there's just no point. If Merrick Garland was actually, if they started hearings and then had a vote, he wouldn't have been ascended to the Supreme Court. But this has been the rule. In fact, it was originally, before it was called the McConnell rule, it was called the Biden rule. And it's a completely different matter if the president and the Senate are controlled by the same party, because ostensibly you're in agreement as to who should be the next Supreme Court nominee. And there is, think back to 2016. What do you think Chuck Schumer would have done if the Democrats were in control of the Senate in 2016 when Scalia died and Obama was president? He would have immediately, he probably, before Scalia was even buried, would have put scheduled hearings for the replacement of him on the Supreme Court. And talking about what seat belongs to whom or whatever, and people talk a lot about the balance of the court, whether it's going to be a conservative majority or a liberal majority. Frankly, and Sam knows this very well, over the history, it seems like Republicans keep nominating. They got about a 30% success rate on getting an actual conservative on the Supreme Court, not somebody who goes squishy and votes with the left bloc, which always votes together on everything. But if Chuck Schumer and the Democrats were in charge of the Senate in 2016 and with Barack Obama as president and Scalia died, they would have replaced probably the greatest conservative jurist of the last 100 years on the Supreme Court with a hard lefty. Talk about changing the way the Supreme Court and changing decisions for history, would be. That's not how it worked out, though, of course. And so instead, he tried to nominate a so-called moderate Merrick Garland and see if he could get it through. Of course, it just wasn't going to work out. But, it's because they are controlled by opposite parties. That's what the rule is. And basically, it's to stop wasting everybody's time, because there's no way, because they're not going to work together to get a Supreme Court nominee through.
Go ahead, Samantha.
I have a few interesting set of figures. So there have been 29 Supreme Court vacancies during an election year, of which 19 were when the majority of the Senate was the same party as the president, and 17 of those were confirmed. This is not the first time this has happened in history. This is not even remotely the first time. This is a very common instance. Of course, there is going to be glaring contradictions between the Merrick Garland case and this instance, but just like Jim just said, just like Jim said, it's just the hand you're dealt. It's the way the game is played. It happens to be that it's confirmed by the Senate. Sometimes that happens to fall in line with the partisanship of the presidency, and sometimes it doesn't. And that's just it.
Yeah.
That's a tough cookie, man.
Writer Jacob Sullum puts it most bluntly, at least that I've read, in an article on Reason.com, where he says the process for filling a Supreme Court vacancy is straightforward. The president chooses a new justice with the advice and consent of the Senate. Any other conditions, including those imagined by Republicans in 2016 or by Democrats now, are nothing but self-serving nonsense. So it says, he goes on to talk about statements made by Mitch McConnell, and it kind of clears up this whole seemingly contradictory positions between 2016 and 2020. Where it says in 2014, the midterms prior to 2016, the Senate swung hard to the Republicans. So Mitch McConnell used this as justification to hold back the Obama presidency as much as possible. In 2018 midterms, on the other hand, the Republicans actually gained increased their majority. So that gave McConnell the green light to move things along, basically with the blessings of the American people. So, I mean, Sam, is this about right? I'm not mangling this, right?
No, not at all. The fact is that these rules, the McConnell rule and the Biden rule, are just imaginary. They're made up. The Constitution says the president will appoint Supreme Court justices with the advice and consent of the Senate. So what's happening in 2020 is the Senate saying, we think that this would be good. Let's have this, whoever it is that Trump is going to nominate, let's have a vote on it, and we'll probably confirm that person because we already know who Trump is going to nominate, in the sense that there's a list and everybody on that list is good. So fine, we'll do it. But in 2016, it was a completely different situation in this regard. You had, as you say, a Democrat president, Republican Senate. Well, here's what they did. The president nominated, which is appointed, it says in the Constitution, but the president nominated a person to be Supreme Court justice, and the Senate did not confirm. It doesn't matter whether there's a vote or not. They didn't confirm.
Right.
So what's the difference? The difference is nil. They're either going to confirm or not confirm this time. They made a decision last time, which was not to confirm, by not even bringing it up for a vote.
Right. Like, as the great Geddy Lee says in the song Free Will, even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And that's exactly that's exactly what the Senate did. They actually offered their advice and consent. Their advice was, you probably should nominate somebody, and their consent was withheld.
And may I make one comment here? The reason this is all such a big doggone deal and so political is because the court has been politicized, and it is the progressive movement in the beginning of the 20th century that causes this. And so what happens is you have two completely different views on the court. One is that the Constitution is a document under which we live. The other is that the Constitution is a framework that has incredible flexibility that is limited only by the human imagination, meaning the imagination of 5 people on the Supreme Court at any one time. So the fact that the court has become so politicized that they could, for example, the most notorious decision, and the one that has led to the most controversy and all of the controversy of the last 4 decades, is the Roe v. Wade decision, which said, in one thing, it said that the states don't have the right to decide on what to do about abortion. That the 5 justices, or in that case 7, can decide that. And everything flows from that the court has so politicized things by taking power away from the states and therefore from the people, that it is immensely political. That unless the courts are making decisions that are going to give power back to the people, then the power isn't there. So we've lost that. We've become something that's not really a republic at this point, and certainly not a republic that is ruled by the people as a whole. So it's this politicization of the court that has made this such a problem. If all they were doing is looking at things and saying, does this match what the Constitution says? Yes or no, thumbs up, thumbs down, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But it is, because we are limited only by the imaginations of 5 people.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I don't know if we're going to really be able to put that toothpaste back in the tube. But I'm looking at this article here, the Heritage Foundation, How Fast Can Senate Move? And in it, it talks about the time between like the nomination and the confirmation of justices throughout time here. And it says Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 42 days, Sandra Day O'Connor, 33 days, John Paul Stevens, 19 days, Lewis Powell, 45 days, Harry Blackmun, 27 days, Warren Burger, 17 days. And I had to go and look this one up, but Kavanaugh took 90 days. So Jim mentioned earlier in the podcast that we're only 40 days away from this election. So Jim, it seems like it's going to be cutting it pretty close here. What do you think? Is this going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. By the time the election comes, we publish. Let's just say very soon after people are listening to this podcast, President Trump will announce his pick. It's rumored at this time to be Amy Coney Barrett, and we will see. And that's actually going to be a very good, interesting debate topic, talking about her in particular, and the fact that Joe Biden won't name any of his people. I think it's going to be quite the contrast. But yeah, of course, the Senate can do this more quickly. There's no rule that everything has to get longer and more difficult just because that's the way the trend seems to be. Mitch McConnell, when you were on a text thread with me, Donnie, I think on Friday night when the notorious RBG had passed, and the discussion shamefully went to whether or not Trump's going to be able to get somebody to replace her before the election. And there was a lot of pessimism at first. And then we saw that night that Mitch McConnell announced, like, we are going to have a vote on a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I think my immediate reaction was, oh, good luck. He promised a vote. He didn't promise getting somebody approved. But I think one of our friends had pointed out, I think Tim Benson did, who hosts the illiteracy podcast here at the Heartland Institute. Little plug for him. But he had pointed out that Mitch McConnell wouldn't have called a vote if he didn't know he was going to win it. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought that that's correct. Mitch McConnell is many things. He is not somebody who likes to lose. And I simply actually cannot recall a single time on any controversial issue where Mitch McConnell called a vote and lost it. So for him to have said that immediately, obviously there was a lot of talk in the background about obviously the tight timeline, some of the squishy Republicans who may or may not vote for Trump's appointee. But the more I think about it, the more I think it's going to happen, and it's probably going to happen. Obviously, it's going to happen before Election Day.
So the big question for me is, especially after the whole Kavanaugh circus that lasted 3 months, now that I counted up all the days, I mean, is that what we're setting ourselves up for? I mean, we're going to see a circus like this again? Sam, do you want to talk to that, or maybe Jim?
It'll be a circus, but I don't think it'll take 90 days or anything like it. The fact of the matter is that the Republicans realize that they've got this, they have to do it, and they might as well just get it done. The bottom line is that if they do it after the election, it's history. It's just history, whatever happens then. And if they do it before the election, it might influence the election. But that's on their calculations. Remember, again, you have to look at what politicians do, not what they say, or even worse, what analysts say. As Jim pointed out, McConnell said, we're going to have a vote. That tells you all you need to know, that that whoever Trump nominates, provided it's somebody from the list, is going to get the seat. So that's not, I don't even see it as a big deal. I mean, sure, there's going to be a lot of yelling and screaming. That's what's new.
So on is she on The View, Meghan McCain? Is that The View that she's okay? She said that the whole Kavanaugh hearing thing radicalized her, and just the fact that they would take somebody like that and just drag them through the mud relentlessly and smear them just from one end of the country to the other in front of their family, radicalized her to this idea of what the left would do for political purposes. And I know just from anecdotal evidence of friends and family, they feel the same way. I've had a couple of people that are I'm registering to vote because of what happened with Kavanaugh. Samantha, have you kind of noticed any of that same type of sentiment in the circles that you're in?
I have, although I will say, as someone who is more in the younger demographic, and I recently was in college, a big chunk of the people that I'm surrounded with are on the opposite viewpoint of myself. So I'm talking most of my former college classmates, sorority sisters, they are continuing to, I'm seeing constant reposts and social media, all the different outlets for voting. And why voting is important, because they don't want the Trump replacement on the Supreme Court. And that, I'm going to tie that back into why I said that RBG really shouldn't be, and then the Supreme Court vacancy, in my opinion, shouldn't be a topic for the debate, because I don't think it's debatable. I think it's in the Constitution that it's fully within the president's rights to do this. It is fully within the Senate. Like you were just saying, Jim and Donnie, Mitch McConnell knows the Senate. He knows his peers. He knows what's going to go through or not. He would not have called this, or like Tim said, he would not have called this had it not been feasible that it would pass. This shouldn't be a topic for debate. I think there are more pressing issues that I would like to see Biden try to answer, and more questions I would like to see him try to answer, as opposed to just villainizing Trump for not fulfilling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's dying wish. I think Democrats are going to do everything in their power to make this as Kavanaugh-like as possible. I think it's going to be interesting. So far, the short list of all of Trump's nominees are all women. So I think that's a kind of checking a mark in the box for the intersectional, right? If on the left they want to attack anything and everything, if you have a woman, at least there's that going for them. But it frightens me, the dialogue that I am hearing from some of my peers and that I'm hearing from people on the left that basically says, it's almost like threats. It's almost like, oh, if the Republicans and Trump push through a nominee, then it's all fair game. And that's scary. Like, we're talking filibusters, impeachments, packing the courts, protests. And I mean, AOC even mentioned, and I'm not going to get this verbatim correctly, but there's been talks on the media about throwing, like, why doesn't the House just go for another impeachment? Why don't we just try to, right? Let's call another impeachment trial to try to take away from Trump being able to do something that is fully listed within his rights in the Constitution. So yeah, I'm fearful of the lack of knowledge of, sorry, I have a lot of feelings. I'm going on a bit of a rant. But
No, I get it. And yeah, you're right. It seems like everything's on the table. You mentioned the whole idea of packing the court, which is what I want to move to next here. So, I mean, as people should know, or probably do know, it's not enshrined in the Constitution that there's 9 justices of the Supreme Court. There was originally 6, correct? And it wasn't up until 9. They didn't get up until 9 until like 1869. And then there has been proposals in the past to put more justices on the Supreme Court. FDR, after the court ruled many of his Green New Deal proposals were unconstitutional, he wanted to increase the size of the court by 6. So he wanted to bring it up to 15. And he wanted to sell that by saying that it would lighten the load for some of the older justices of the Supreme Court, right? So they have some logic in there when they're trying to propose something like this. And in this day and age, like, I'm not putting anything past this. I mean, they would double the size of the court just to spite Trump's existence. So I don't think that it's outlandish that this might be a course of action that they pursue here. So I was reading this article that was from our own Chris Talgo, which I don't even think is published yet. So I'm giving you a sneak peek. But he talks about how in 2019, the New York Times asked Senator Kamala Harris, "Are you open to expanding the size of the Supreme Court?" To which Harris responded, "I'm absolutely open to it." That same year, Harris told Politico that we're on the verge of a crisis of confidence in the Supreme Court. We have to take this challenge head on, and everything is on the table to do that. And Andy, I'm going to ask you to pull up this video because most recently, Biden was asked about the concept of packing the court or expanding the size of the court. And his answer was pretty, I don't know if it was alarming, but maybe kind of telling. So yeah, once you have that clip up there, go ahead and play that for us.
So I asked Biden a hypothetical question. If he's elected president and Democrats gain control of the Senate, would he consider adding more seats to the Supreme Court?
It's a legitimate question, but let me tell you, I'm not going to answer that question because it will shift all the focus. That's what he wants. He never wants to talk about the issue at hand. He always tries to change the subject. Once I answer that question, then the whole debate's going to be, well, Biden said or didn't say. Biden said he would or wouldn't.
Okay, so go ahead and stop it there. I mean,
why the hell is he wearing a mask? By the way, he's all by himself in a room that looks like a basement. Good grief.
But like, come on, is that not the most telling thing? First off, he says like, oh, he's always trying to shift the topic from the topic
as he shifts the topic.
As he's shifting the topic. And then he says, and then the whole conversation will be what I said and what I didn't say. It's like, no, because if you said, no, I'm not going to pack the Supreme Court, that would be the end of the talk. Nobody would ever bring it up again. It would only be the topic of discussion if you said that you were in favor of doing that. So, Jim, am I reading too much into this, or does it seem like Biden basically confirmed that he's totally for packing the Supreme Court?
Well, his running mate sure is, and I think he's open to it. This whole idea that he doesn't have to answer questions because I'm not going to do that. That's not going to fly. In fact, that's what's going to be most interesting in the debate. But Joe Biden has refused to talk about his son. There's been a new Senate report put out this week that details the level of corruption that was involved with his son Hunter and Ukraine while Joe Biden was vice president and put in charge of Ukraine policy for the United States. That's kind of a big story, and Trump's actually going to bring it up in the debate on Tuesday. You can guarantee it. But you can't go around saying, I refuse to answer basic questions like, are you in favor of the radical policy of stacking the Supreme Court with a bunch of liberals if you have the control and the ability to do it with the Democratic Senate and Democratic president? That's kind of a big deal. Sam knows this, I'm sure, but the Constitution actually is very unspecific about the entire federal judiciary. It doesn't tell you how many justices you need on the Supreme Court. It just says there is one. It doesn't even actually lay out what the circuit court system for the federal circuit courts. It doesn't say anything about that. Those are all creations of Congress. So technically, and under the Constitution, the Congress can do whatever they want with the Supreme Court and other courts. But talk about breaking norms. I mean, that's supposedly one of the biggest criticisms about Donald Trump, is that he's breaking all the norms of our government and society. I don't know, putting about another 4, 5, 6 lefties on the Supreme Court because you have the power to do it. That's about as big a norm breaker as you can be. And what's actually funny about that is that while the left and Schumer and others and Kamala Harris are floating that idea out there, what if Trump wins and the Republicans keep the Senate? They have just set the precedent, basically, that this is an open question and this is something that should be pursued. How funny would it be if Donald Trump and the Republican Senate, starting in 2021, decided to increase the Supreme Court from 9 people to 13, with 3 more people from his list? That would be 4 more people from his list. Now, that would be pretty funny.
Oh, that would be a disaster, because
it would be a disaster.
Time,
I mean, they're not going to do it. And they shouldn't do it. But,
the slippery slope on that, we would be looking back at like 2030 and be like, wow, how did we have 90 Supreme Court justices all of a sudden? All right, we only have a few minutes here, so again, I want to do another prediction time here. Will the seat be filled before the election, Jim?
Yes.
All right, easy enough. Samantha, will the seat be filled?
Yes, and I'm going to go ahead and throw Amy Cohen Barrett as who I think the actual justice will be.
And Sam Karnick, what do you think?
No.
Okay, all right. I thought I was going to be the only dissenter here, too. I don't think it will be either. I think this is far too important. I think that the left is going to throw out every dirty trick in the book to stop this from happening. Is that the same justification you have for your answer, Sam?
Yeah, the way I see it is that it's all pluses to go into the election with this still hanging there. It's all pluses for the Republicans. If that's still hanging there, it's like, well, let's make sure to get out and vote for these people so that we get our Supreme Court justice. And I just like to mention something briefly about court packing. All that was already being discussed long ago. It has nothing to do with the current situation and with the any objections to filling Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat. They were talking about that before, as was alluded to by the fact that Kamala Harris has already said she's for it. So the bottom line is that the left is willing to consider anything. They'll do anything to consolidate power in the central government. That's what they do, and that's their job. Okay, so we get that. The problem we have here is if they were to pack the court, there's one big reason they want to do that, which is so that they can win elections in the future by, frankly, cheating.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I mean, there's only, like Jim said, 40 days into the election. But so I'm sure we'll be talking about this stuff as it progresses on every Friday for a new episode of the In the Tank podcast. I think we're going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you for joining us. Join us every Friday for a new episode. If you like our show, please subscribe, rate a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. You could find us on pretty much everything: Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google, YouTube, even, whatever. Follow us on socialist Twitter at In the Tank Pod. You can send us your comments, suggestions, questions by emailing us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim, where can the fine people find you?
You can find me on socialist Twitter at @JLakely. You can also follow the Heartland Institute's account at HeartlandInst, and always visit heartland.org.
Sam Karnick, anything you want to plug at the end of this episode here?
Yes, heartlanddailynews.com. Go to Heartland Daily News for good updates on what's going on and how it's affecting public policy.
Fantastic. Samantha Fillmore, where can people find you?
You can find me. I only do Instagram. It is at Samantha F Policy. And full disclaimer, that is of my own. It's not affiliated with the Heartland, but I am here at Heartland, and you can find me at Heartland GR if you have any questions or happen to want to see what we're up to. Love the work that we do here.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.